Tim Neal, and for today, I think the thing actually I was very interested in was actually the zine as much as anything else. I've called myself a power academic at times because I do things I don't get paid for, but sort of bring academic skills, I think, in outside academia. And I'm interested in the notion of what happens if you bring academic work and universities into communities. But with one foot in the community world, I have a tendency to be quite negative about the value of that sort of work outside its immediate happening. So that was one thing that was crossing my mind this morning, listening to the paper about participatory arts activity was, so how incredibly valuable is it that skilled people, caring people do something for a period of time, but that needs to continue. I don't think it works in the sense that you sow this seed of participatory action of someone involved in politics and then you disappear off, that it does leave behind. What does it leave behind? That's one thing. And then in terms of the presentation you made this morning, I think you were also asking that precise question for the notion of a film about the people who've been, you didn't use the word gentrified, but the people who've been moved out of areas because of changes, as you were describing in Gateshead, as what's happened to them and what's their...
Stirring to that. I know that the microphone began stirring noises.
Yeah, so what happens to those people? And that's something that I've been thinking about this morning. The other thing that caught my attention that I wrote down here was the Gateshead cultural icons, which is what you were talking about, sort of in some way destroying local culture, so then what happens to that culture? And then in terms of what I put in the zine, I was really thinking about the issues of doing anything with people in poverty, and I work in the communities I work with. I've worked a lot with asylum seekers, destitute asylum seekers who are in absolute poverty. And with Roma populations from Eastern Europe who live in what I would consider poverty, that how can they be brought into some sort of notional state of engagement with this broad democratic, sharing world of sort of multicultural happiness without actually doing something that eventually destroys the culture that they actually hold dear to. So what I put in the zine is something about that. It's about where we're situated in something that eventually is a sort of fire. And I was thinking of revolution as a sort of fire, as something that's got a lot of heat and a lot of destruction in it. And what seems to be wanted here is not really a fire, but a sort of a gradual, slow burn. So the image I was thinking of was either a sort of something going through almost like an incinerator you'd have in a cemetery. But eventually I drew something that represented a phoenix with the notion of I don't know where I situate myself, whether in the eye of the phoenix or whether down in the flames or what happens afterwards. So I like the zine as a way of getting a group like this to actually produce a set of, thought of comments about something. And I like academic engagement with communities, which I'm sure is extremely valuable. But a lot of that work's already being done, I often feel. So my experience of, say, spending time with community police officers, PCSOs in Rotherham in the district is that they're already acting and co-producing knowledge and doing all that. And a lot of these ideas that are being discussed here are already disseminated, probably from the 30s, from the 50s, from the 60s, from the 70s. And so you're there in 1980 filming in Gateshead, doing the same thing as is being discussed now. And that I think maybe academic input is in some way be valuable to actually recognise what's already being done, rather than this sense I have a slight sense of reinventing the wheel that's going on, or of teaching one's grandmother to suck eggs.
I agree with you. There is a value-laden set of words which is around challenging neighbourhood. What's your view, and what examples would you choose?
Well, I live in what would be called a challenging neighbourhood, and I live on a very quiet cul-de-sac in that challenging neighbourhood. And the neighbourhood is a district which has got a huge amount of migration in it. It's a very great mixture of languages and people from all over the world. And the street I live on, which has only got about 50 houses on it, as in a cul-de-sac, is a small, largely white British enclave within it. And the house prices are a bit higher than the other streets ahead. Kids can play out on the street. And that street, if you're not from that street and you walk up that street, you feel, I'm sure you absolutely know that everyone's looking at you thinking who you are. And our street, which is a really, really lovely street to live on, is a challenging neighbourhood for other people in the area who would like probably to live on it or would like to be able to walk up. And there are other sorts of challenging neighbourhoods where I live, where there are street activities that people find intimidating. So I think that it depends who you are about what you feel challenged by. And people have moved out of our area in order to avoid what they consider to be challenging aspects of people's behaviour. And
what needs to change?
I think people need to have really long-term patience, and I think that society as a general and the political class need to have a considerably more hope for some resolution to this, rather than a sort of rather dark notion of that things aren't going to work, or that we won't even try to make it work. I think of recognising that the society we live in has got a huge amount of institutional will to actually do things to resolve some of the more difficult issues. And I think to have more confidence, I actually think more confidence in the sort of Western intellectual tradition, and not to discount it as something that's failed.
Lastly, what next?
What next? What next? No, that's a nice question, isn't it? What next? Well, I don't know. We carry on, I think. We carry on as we're carrying on. So there you are. And I liked yours because I liked the timeline through it. And I think that everyone here is probably carrying on in some way. So I think we all carry on and believe and have confidence that people will start carrying on from before us.